Andrea Hayes had stopped believing in love somewhere around case number 73. She couldn't remember the exact moment. Maybe it was the couple who threw china at each other in her conference room. Maybe it was the husband who'd been cheating for 12 years while his wife raised their 3 children alone. Maybe it was the woman who cried so hard she vomited in Andrea's trash can, then apologized for the mess. Divorce after divorce after divorce, each one a small death, each one bleeding into the next until Andrea couldn't remember what hope looked like anymore. At 44, she was one of the best divorce attorneys in Portland. 18 years of practice, partner at Morrison & Hayes, $600,000 a year, win rate that made opposing counsel nervous. She was efficient, ruthless when necessary, fair when possible, and completely, utterly empty. But nobody knew that. Not her colleagues who respected her, not her clients who trusted her, not even Michael, her husband of 15 years, though maybe he suspected. Maybe they both suspected. Maybe that was the problem. Andrea sat in courtroom 7 on a Tuesday morning in October, watching another marriage end. The wife was crying quietly, mascara tracking down her cheeks. The husband stared at the table, jaw tight, hands clenched. 22 years of marriage dissolved in 40 minutes of legal procedure. Judge Bernard signed the decree. The couple stood, walked in opposite directions, never looked back. Andrea packed her briefcase. Another one done. Another autopsy complete. Her client, the wife, caught her in the hallway. "Thank you, Miss Hayes. I know this was difficult, but you made it bearable." Andrea smiled the smile she'd perfected over 18 years. Professional, compassionate, distant. "I'm glad I could help. Take care of yourself." The woman nodded, walked away, and Andrea felt nothing. She should feel something. Satisfaction at winning, maybe. Sadness for the marriage. Something. But there was just the familiar numbness that had become her default setting somewhere around case number 200. She drove back to the office, Portland rain drumming on the windshield, and thought about nothing in particular. Traffic, lunch, the deposition scheduled for Thursday. Anything except the thought that had been growing louder in her head for the past year. Her own marriage was dying, and she was doing absolutely nothing to save it. The office was glass and steel and expensive art that nobody looked at. Andrea took the elevator to the 9th floor, walked past associates who nodded respectfully, and closed herself in her corner office with its view of the river and mountains beyond. Beautiful. Empty. Like everything else. She had 3 hours before her next appointment. She opened her laptop, pulled up case files, tried to focus, but her mind drifted, as it always did these days, to the other thing. The secret thing. The thing nobody knew about. At 11:45, she locked her office door, opened an incognito browser, navigated to Medium, logged in with an email address that wasn't connected to her real name. Username: The Autopsy Report. 520,000 followers. 8 years of anonymous posts. 8 years of dissecting love's corpses for an audience that hung on every word. Andrea stared at the blank page. New post. She'd been publishing twice a week for 8 years, never missed a deadline. But today, the cursor blinked accusingly, and she had nothing to say. She closed the laptop, ate lunch at her desk, turkey sandwich, black coffee, returned emails, took a call from a potential client whose husband had emptied their joint account and moved to Costa Rica. Normal Tuesday. At 6:30, she drove home. The apartment was in the Pearl District, 19th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, kitchen she barely used. $1.2 million. Bought 5 years ago. Decorated by someone else. Felt like a hotel. Michael wasn't home yet. He was never home yet. Architect, busy, important projects, working late, always working late. Had been working late for approximately 2 years. Andrea knew because she tracked patterns. Occupational hazard. She microwaved leftover Thai food. Ate standing at the counter. Watched the city lights come on below. Portland at night looked like a circuit board. All those lives lighting up in tiny squares, everyone in their boxes, everyone separate. Michael came home at 9:15. She heard his keys in the door, his footsteps in the hallway, the rustle of his coat. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, tie loosened, hair graying at the temples, handsome in the way men in their mid-40s are handsome when they take care of themselves. "Hey," he said. "Hey," she said. "You eat?" "Yeah, there's Thai in the fridge. I ate at the office." Of course he did. He always did. They stood in the kitchen, 3 feet apart, and had nothing else to say. 8 months ago, maybe 9, they'd stopped trying to fill the silence. Just let it sit there between them, heavy and familiar. "I'm going to work in the study for a bit," Michael said. "Okay, I'm going to read." He nodded, walked away. She heard the study door close. Not slam. Michael never slammed doors. Neither did she. They were both too civilized for that. Too tired. Andrea went to the bedroom. Their bedroom, though Michael hadn't slept there in 8 months. He'd moved to the guest room after a fight they'd had about something she couldn't even remember now. Work, probably. It was always work. And neither of them had suggested he move back. Neither of them had acknowledged the arrangement at all. They just adjusted, adapted, pretended it was normal to be married roommates. She changed into pajamas, washed her face, looked at herself in the mirror. 44. Still attractive, she supposed. Dark hair starting to show gray she covered every 6 weeks. Lines around her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Tired. She looked tired. At 11, she heard Michael's footsteps in the hallway, the guest room door closing, the apartment settling into silence. Andrea waited until 11:30. Then she got her laptop, sat in bed, opened the incognito browser, stared at the blank page that had been blank since this morning. She needed to write. Her followers expected it. Twice a week for 8 years. Consistent. Reliable. But tonight, like every night for the past month, the words wouldn't come. Because how could she write about other people's failed marriages when her own was failing in slow motion and she was doing nothing to stop it? Case number 348, she thought. That's what this would be. Her own case. Andrea Hayes versus Michael Hayes. Irreconcilable differences. Division of assets. Dissolution of marriage. Clean. Efficient. Painless as possible. Except it wouldn't be painless. Nothing was ever really painless. She closed the laptop without writing anything, turned off the light, lay in the dark and listened to the apartment breathe around her. Heating system clicking. Refrigerator humming. The distant sound of traffic 19 floors below. All the small noises of a life that looked successful from the outside and felt hollow from within. Sleep came eventually. It always did. And morning came after that. The way it always does, indifferent to whether you're ready for it. Wednesday started like every Wednesday. Coffee, shower, suit, navy blue, professional, makeup, hair, the armor of competence. Andrea looked at herself in the mirror and saw exactly what she wanted the world to see. A woman in control. A woman who had answers. Michael was already gone. He left early on Wednesdays. She didn't know why. Hadn't asked. The office, more cases, more couples dividing their lives into spreadsheets. Andrea moved through consultations and negotiations with practiced ease. This was the part she was good at. The part that made sense. Other people's problems had solutions, clear steps, legal frameworks. Her own life was the mess she couldn't solve. At 2 o'clock, she had an intake meeting with a new client. Woman, early 40s, married 15 years, no children. Andrea read the preliminary questionnaire while waiting. Standard stuff. Growing apart. Communication breakdown. No infidelity, no abuse, just the slow death of intimacy that happened to so many couples. The woman, Jessica Parker, sat across from Andrea's desk and twisted her wedding ring nervously. "I don't know exactly when it ended," she said, voice quiet. "I keep trying to pinpoint the moment, you know. Like if I could find it, I could understand it. But there wasn't a moment. It was just gradual. Andrea wrote notes she didn't need to write, anything to avoid meeting the woman's eyes. We stopped touching first, Jessica continued. Not sex, though that went too. Just casual touching. His hand on my back, my head on his shoulder. Those small things that say, we're connected. One day I realized it had been months since we'd touched at all, and I didn't know how to bring it back without making it weird. Andrea's pen stopped moving. Then we stopped talking about real things, just logistics. Who's buying groceries? When's the dentist appointment? We became roommates running a household together, and I kept thinking, this is temporary. This is just a phase. But phases don't last 3 years. Jessica looked up, tears threatening. How did I let it get this far, Miss Hayes? How did I not notice until it was too late? Andrea felt something crack inside her chest, something she'd been holding carefully in place for months, maybe years. Because Jessica's story wasn't Jessica's story. It was Andrea's story. Every word, every detail, the gradual erosion, the casual touches that stopped, the conversations that became logistics, the roommate existence. 3 years, Jessica had said. Andrea calculated silently. How long had it been for her and Michael? 2 years since the touching stopped. 18 months since they'd had a real conversation. 8 months since he moved to the guest room. Ms. Hayes? Jessica was looking at her with concern. Are you okay? Andrea realized she'd been silent too long. She straightened her shoulders, found her professional voice. Yes, I'm sorry. I was just thinking about your case. Liar. The good news is, with no children and no major disputes about assets, this should be relatively straightforward. Straightforward, Jessica repeated like the word tasted wrong. I'm ending my marriage and it's straightforward. I didn't mean... No, you're right. That's what it is now. Straightforward, logical. 2 people who promised forever, dividing up their IKEA furniture. Jessica laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. I'm sorry. I know you're trying to help. It's just hard to accept that this is where we ended up. Andrea closed the file, looked at Jessica directly, and, for the first time in 18 years, she broke her own rule about maintaining professional distance. It's hard because you thought love was enough, but love without communication is just 2 people being lonely together. Jessica stared at her. That's exactly what it was. Lonely together. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Andrea gathered herself, pulled back into professional mode, and spent the next 40 minutes outlining the divorce process, the timeline, the costs, all the practical details that made ending a marriage into a checklist. Jessica left with a folder of documents and instructions to gather financial records. Andrea sat alone in her office after Jessica left and felt the weight of her own words. Love without communication is just 2 people being lonely together. When had she last really talked to Michael? Not about bills or schedules, but about feelings, fears, dreams, the things that mattered. She tried to remember and couldn't. Months, maybe longer. Her phone buzzed. Text from Michael. Working late again. Don't wait up. She stared at the message. 4 years ago, she would have texted back asking what he was working on, offering to bring him dinner, saying she missed him. Now she just typed, okay. 1 word. That's what they'd become. 1-word texts and separate bedrooms and a marriage that was dying so quietly that neither of them had the energy to even argue about it. Andrea stayed at the office until 8. Went home to an empty apartment. Microwaved more leftovers. Tried to work on a brief, but couldn't focus. At 10:30, she opened her laptop. The blog. Maybe tonight she could write. The blank page stared back at her, cursor blinking its judgment. She thought about Jessica Parker, about lonely together, about all the cases she'd handled where couples described the exact same slow death. And she thought about how she'd written about these patterns dozens of times, analyzed them clinically, identified the warning signs, spelled out the progression. How many posts had she written about communication breakdown? About intimacy dying? About roommate marriages? She'd written about all of it, documented it, explained it, to 500,000 strangers, while living it herself and pretending she wasn't. Andrea started typing. Case, Picture 348. The expert. She stopped, deleted it, started again. I've written about 347 divorces over 8 years. I've identified patterns, warning signs, the small deaths that lead to the big one. I've told you how marriages end. What I haven't told you is that I'm watching my own marriage end in real time, and I'm doing nothing to stop it. Her hands were shaking. She kept typing. I haven't told you that my husband sleeps in the guest room, that we haven't touched in 2 years, that our conversations are limited to logistics and our text messages are 1 word long. I haven't told you that I see all the signs I've written about, and I ignore them because acknowledging them would mean facing something I'm not ready to face. She stopped. Read what she'd written. Her finger hovered over the delete key. This wasn't like her other posts. Those were analytical, clinical, observations about other people's pain, wrapped in compassion but ultimately distant. This was raw, vulnerable, true. If she published this, everything would change. Her anonymity might not survive it. Her professional reputation could be damaged. People would call her a hypocrite. They'd be right, but maybe that was the point. Maybe being a hypocrite was better than being a coward. Andrea stared at the screen, at the truth she'd finally written down, at the choice in front of her. She closed the laptop without publishing. Not yet. She wasn't ready yet, but the words were there now. Written. Real. Waiting. Thursday morning, Andrea woke to rain hammering against the windows and the realization that she couldn't keep pretending. Not after writing those words. Not after seeing her own marriage reflected in Jessica Parker's eyes. She got up, made coffee, stood at the kitchen counter and waited for Michael to appear. He always left at 7:15 on Thursdays. She knew his schedule better than he probably did. 18 years of marriage did that. You learned the patterns even when you stopped learning the person. 7 o'clock, 7:10. At 7:14, Michael walked into the kitchen, briefcase in hand, already dressed for work. He stopped when he saw her standing there, clearly waiting. "Hey," he said, cautious. They didn't usually see each other in the mornings anymore. "Hey," Andrea replied. "Do you have a minute?" Something flickered in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or resignation, like he knew what was coming and had been waiting for it. "Yeah, sure." They stood on opposite sides of the kitchen island. The granite between them felt symbolic. "We need to talk," Andrea said, and hated herself for using the most cliched phrase in relationship history. "I know," Michael said. Of course he knew. They both knew. They'd probably both known for months, maybe years, and had been waiting for the other person to say it first. That's what cowards did. Waited. "When was the last time we had a real conversation?" Andrea asked. Michael thought about it. "Your mother's funeral. 18 months ago." He was right. They'd talked then. Really talked. About grief and loss and the strange relief of endings that had been long coming. Andrea's mother had been sick for 3 years before she died. The funeral had been sad but not tragic. Just the natural conclusion to a difficult story. 18 months, Andrea repeated. And before that? I don't know. 2 years. The trip to Seattle. We talked in the car. That was 3 years ago, Michael. Was it? He looked genuinely surprised. God. 3 years. They stood in silence. The coffee maker beeped. Neither of them moved. I've been sleeping in the guest room for 8 months, Michael said quietly. I know. You never asked me to come back. You never offered. Would it have mattered if I did? Andrea opened her mouth to say yes, of course it would have mattered, but the lie wouldn't come. I don't know, she said instead. Honestly, I don't know. Michael nodded like he'd expected that answer. He set his briefcase down on the counter, ran his hand through his hair, the way he always did when he was stressed. Some things didn't change, even when everything else did. I don't know when we stopped being married, he said. I know we still are, legally, but actually being married, being partners, being in love, I don't know when that ended. Do you? Andrea thought about all the cases she'd handled, all the couples who sat in her office asking the same question. When did it end? They always wanted a specific moment, a identifiable turning point. But that wasn't usually how it worked. Marriages didn't end in explosions. They ended in gradual erosion. 1,000 small neglects that added up to something unfixable. No, she said. I don't know when it ended. I just know that it did. Yeah, Michael said. Me too. Another silence. Longer this time. Andrea heard the rain. The traffic 19 floors below. Her own heartbeat, steady and calm, like this wasn't the conversation that would define the rest of her life. So, what do we do? Michael asked. Andrea almost laughed, because this was the question she answered professionally every single day. What do we do? Here's the process. Here are your options. Here's the timeline. She could recite the divorce procedure in her sleep. But standing in her own kitchen, looking at her own husband, she had no idea what to say. I think we both know what we do, she finally said. Michael closed his eyes briefly, opened them. Yeah, I think we do. I'm sorry, Andrea said, and was surprised to find she meant it. She'd represented hundreds of divorces and heard thousands of apologies. Most of them were empty, but this one felt real. She was sorry. Sorry they'd let it get this far. Sorry they hadn't fought harder. Sorry they'd both been too scared or too tired or too something to fix what was breaking. Me too, Michael said. I'm sorry too. They stood there, two intelligent adults acknowledging the end of their marriage with the emotional depth of a business transaction. And maybe that's exactly what they'd become. Business partners, roommates, two people sharing expenses and space, but nothing that mattered. We should probably do this properly, Andrea said, slipping into lawyer mode because it was easier than feeling things. Sit down, figure out assets, division, timeline. Are you going to represent yourself? Michael asked. God, no. That would be insane. I'll have someone from the firm handle it. Should I get a lawyer? Only if you think we'll fight about things. Are we going to fight? Michael looked at her for a long moment. No, I don't think we have the energy to fight. He was right. They didn't. That was maybe the saddest part. They were ending their marriage not in anger, but in exhaustion. No dramatic betrayals, no passionate arguments. Just two people too tired to keep pretending. I can move out, Michael said. I've been looking at apartments. Nothing serious yet, but I've been looking. How long have you been looking? 6 months. 6 months. He'd been planning this for 6 months. Andrea felt a strange mix of hurt and relief. Hurt that he'd been preparing to leave without telling her. Relief that she hadn't been crazy to feel the end coming. I looked at apartments too, she admitted. 4 months ago. Thought about keeping this place, but I don't know. It feels like it belongs to people we used to be. Yeah, Michael said softly. It does. The rain kept falling. The coffee kept brewing. Life kept moving forward whether they were ready or not. We really fucked this up, didn't we? Michael said, and Andrea was startled to hear emotion in his voice. Actual emotion. Not just resignation, but genuine sadness. We did, she agreed. Both of us. Equally. You know what's weird? I don't even know what we should have done differently. Talked more? Tried harder? Gone to therapy? We're both smart people. We should have been able to fix this. Andrea thought about that. About all the couples she'd represented who said the exact same thing. We're smart people. We should have been able to fix this. But intelligence didn't save marriages. Intelligence just meant you could articulate the failure better. I don't think it's about being smart, she said. I think it's about being brave enough to be vulnerable, and neither of us was. Michael looked at her with something like surprise. That's very insightful. I've seen a lot of marriages end. You pick things up. Did you write about us? In your blog? Andrea's blood went cold. What? Your blog, the Autopsy Report. I know about it, Andrea. I've known for 3 years. The kitchen tilted slightly. Andrea grabbed the counter to steady herself. You... What? I found it by accident. You left your laptop open. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I was just closing it to charge it and saw the screen. Your posts, your username. He paused. I've read everything you've written since then. Andrea couldn't breathe properly. 3 years. He'd known for 3 years. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered. Because you needed that space, that place to process things. And honestly, I loved reading your writing. It was the only way I could understand what you were really thinking. You never told me, but you told 500,000 strangers. I was analyzing other people's marriages. You were analyzing ours. Every post, every observation. You were documenting our slow death and calling it case studies. Michael's voice wasn't angry, just sad. Case 89, the couple who stopped touching. That was us. Case 147, the marriage that died of neglect. Us again. Case 203, the roommate arrangement. Us. All of it was us. Andrea, you were writing about us the whole time and pretending you weren't. She wanted to deny it. But he was right. God, he was right. I didn't know how to talk to you, she said, voice breaking. So I wrote instead. And I didn't know how to reach you, so I just read what you wrote and pretended it was enough. They looked at each other across the kitchen island. Two people who'd been married for 15 years and had somehow become complete strangers. Two people who'd communicated more through anonymous blog posts than actual conversation. This is so fucked up, Andrea said and started laughing. Not happy laughter. The kind of laughter that happens when the absurdity becomes too much to bear. Michael started laughing too, and for a moment they were connected, laughing at the tragedy of their own marriage, at the cosmic joke of two intelligent people being this spectacularly bad at being together. The laughter faded. Reality settled back in. So, Michael said, I guess we do this. File papers, divide things, move on. Yeah, Andrea said. I guess we do. He picked up his briefcase. I'll text you later. We can figure out details. Okay. He started to leave, stopped in the doorway, turned back. For what it's worth, he said, your writing is beautiful. You should publish under your real name someday. Stop hiding. And then he was gone. The door closed. Andrea stood alone in her kitchen, in her expensive apartment, in her carefully constructed life, and felt everything she'd been holding back for months finally break through. She cried for the first time since her mother's funeral, cried for the marriage that was over, for the years they'd wasted being lonely together, for all the conversations they never had and never would, for the future they'd planned that would never happen now. And when she was done crying, when the tears dried and the shaking stopped, Andrea opened her laptop. She pulled up the draft she'd written last night. The honest one. The vulnerable one. The one that would change everything if she published it. She read it through, added a paragraph, then another, wrote about the conversation she'd just had, about Michael knowing her secret, about marriages ending not with drama but with quiet acknowledgement that both people had already given up. And then, before she could talk herself out of it, before fear could stop her, Andrea pressed publish. Within seconds, the post was live, visible to 520,000 people, and there was no taking it back. Andrea closed the laptop, set it on the counter, stared at it like it might explode. What had she just done? She'd published the truth. Her truth. After 8 years of hiding behind anonymity and clinical analysis, she'd written about her own failing marriage and put it out into the world. And not just the marriage. She'd written about being a divorce lawyer who couldn't save her own relationship, about being an expert who'd missed every sign in her own life, about hypocrisy and blindness and the devastating gap between what we tell others and what we do ourselves. Her phone started buzzing. Notifications. Comments flooding in. She picked it up, hands shaking, and watched the numbers climb. 10 comments. 20. 50. 100. She opened the app, started reading. "Oh my God, this is so brave. I've been following you for 4 years. This is the most honest thing you've ever written. You're not a hypocrite. You're human. Thank you for showing us that. My marriage is dying the same way. Reading this made me feel less alone. Are you okay? Genuinely asking. This must be so hard." Andrea scrolled through dozens of comments. Most were supportive. Some were critical. A few called her exactly what she'd feared they would. Fraud, hypocrite, fake expert. But even the critical ones weren't cruel. They were just honest. And honestly, she deserved criticism. She'd been giving advice while ignoring her own situation. That was the definition of hypocrisy. But as she kept reading, something unexpected happened. People weren't just commenting on her marriage. They were sharing their own stories. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands by now, writing about their own slow deaths, their own roommate marriages, their own fear of admitting failure. "I've been sleeping on the couch for a year. My wife and I don't fight anymore because we don't talk anymore. Thank you for making me see that's not normal. 16 years, 2 kids. We stay together for them, but we're teaching them that loveless marriages are normal. Your post made me realize we need to change that. I'm going to talk to my husband tonight. Really talk. For the first time in God knows how long. You gave me courage." Andrea put the phone down. The comments kept coming. Thousands of people all responding to her vulnerability with their own, all finding connection in shared pain. This was what she'd been trying to do for 8 years with her analytical posts. Help people. Give them insight. But none of those posts had created connection like this, because analysis kept people at a distance. Vulnerability brought them close. She picked up her phone again, scrolled to the top of the comments, and there, posted 3 minutes ago, was a comment from a username she didn't recognize. Michael E. Architect. Her breath caught. "I'm the husband in this post. Everything she wrote is true. I want to add something she didn't mention. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for being too much of a coward to talk, for thinking reading her blog was enough, for planning my exit instead of planning how to stay. She's not a hypocrite. She's someone who tried to save other people's marriages because she couldn't figure out how to save her own. And that doesn't make her a fraud. It makes her heartbreakingly human. Andrea, if you're reading this, thank you for finally being honest. I wish we'd learned how to be honest with each other years ago, but I'm grateful we're being honest now." Andrea read it 3 times. Then a 4th, Michael had commented, on her anonymous blog, using his real name, outing himself as her husband, making himself vulnerable too. She didn't know what to do with that, didn't know how to feel. Sad, grateful, angry that it took a blog post for them to really communicate. All of it. She felt all of it. Her phone rang. Not a notification. An actual call. She looked at the screen. Victoria Chen, managing partner at the firm. Andrea answered. "Hi, Victoria." "Andrea." Victoria's voice was professional but concerned. "Are you available to come to the office? We need to talk." Andrea's stomach dropped. "Is this about a case?" "No, this is about a blog post that's currently going viral and has your name attached to it." Oh, God. Someone had figured out who she was. Of course they had. Michael had used his real name. Anyone could connect the dots. Architect named Michael H. married to a divorce lawyer named Andrea. Portland legal community wasn't that big. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, Andrea said. She showered, dressed, drove to the office in a daze. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray, threatening more. Portland in October. Always threatening more. Victoria's office was on the 10th floor. corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows. View of the city that made you feel important. Andrea had been in this office hundreds of times. Never felt small before. Today, she felt tiny. Victoria sat behind her massive desk, laptop open. She was 62, silver hair cut sharp, eyes that missed nothing. She'd been practicing law for 37 years. She'd built this firm from nothing, and Andrea had probably just embarrassed her publicly. "Sit," Victoria said. Andrea sat. Victoria turned her laptop around so Andrea could see the screen. Her blog post. But not just her post. Articles. News articles. Portland divorce lawyer reveals own marriage collapse in viral blog post. The Autopsy Report. Blogger's identity revealed as local attorney. Divorce expert faces own divorce. The irony that broke the internet. "Shit," Andrea whispered. "Yes," Victoria agreed. "Shit. I'm sorry, I didn't think about consequences, clearly." Victoria closed the laptop, looked at Andrea directly. "But here's the thing. I'm not calling you in here to fire you." Andrea's head snapped up. "You're not?" "No, I'm calling you in here to ask if you're okay." The question caught Andrea completely off guard. What? Are you okay, Andrea? Your marriage is ending. You're dealing with public scrutiny. You just made yourself incredibly vulnerable to 500,000 strangers. That takes a toll. So I'm asking, as someone who's known you for 12 years, are you okay?" Andrea felt tears threatening again. She'd cried more in the last 2 hours than she'd cried in 2 years. "No," she said honestly. "I'm not okay. My marriage is over. I just humiliated myself professionally, and I have no idea what happens next." Victoria nodded. "Okay, that's honest. That's good." She paused. "Do you want to know what I think happens next?" "Please." "I think you take 2 weeks off. Personal leave. Figure out your living situation. Start the divorce process properly. Take care of yourself. And then, I think you come back to work and you're honest with clients about what you're going through when it's relevant. Because, Andrea, that post, that vulnerability, that's going to make you a better lawyer, not a worse one." Andrea stared at her. "How?" "Because for 18 years, you've been representing people going through the worst experience of their lives, and you've never been through it yourself. You've been competent and professional and excellent at your job, but you haven't been empathetic. Not really. You couldn't be. You didn't understand." Victoria leaned forward. "Now you understand, and that makes you more valuable, not less. Some people will say I'm a hypocrite. Some people are idiots. Let them talk." Victoria smiled slightly. "The legal community in this city has known you for years as the ice queen who never loses. Maybe it's time they know you as the human being who's learning how to be vulnerable. There's strength in that." Andrea didn't know what to say. She'd expected anger, disappointment, maybe termination, not understanding, not support. "Thank you," she managed. "Don't thank me yet. The next few weeks are going to be brutal. Media attention, public scrutiny, partners at other firms making snide comments. You're going to want to hide. Don't. Stand in it, own it, and come back stronger." Victoria stood, indicating the meeting was over. Andrea stood too, legs shaky. "Andrea," Victoria said as she reached the door, "that post has been shared 40,000 times in 3 hours. You know what that means?" "That I'm going to regret this forever?" "That 40,000 people needed to hear what you said. 40,000 people felt less alone because you were brave enough to be honest. That matters more than what some judgmental lawyers think at the country club." Andrea nodded, left the office, took the elevator down to her own floor, walked past associates who definitely knew, who'd definitely read the articles. Some looked away. Some offered small supportive smiles. One, Emma Rodriguez, caught her arm. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," Emma said quietly. Thank you. Andrea made it to her office, closed the door, sat at her desk and put her head in her hands. Her phone buzzed. Text from Michael. Saw the news articles. Are you okay? She typed back, define okay. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Want to get coffee? We should probably talk. Really talk. Andrea looked at the message, at the olive branch he was extending, at the possibility of actual communication for the first time in years. Yes, she typed. Let's talk. Because maybe that was the lesson in all of this. Maybe the autopsy of their marriage didn't have to be just an ending. Maybe it could also be an understanding. A way to close this chapter with honesty instead of resentment. And maybe, just maybe, being vulnerable wasn't the weakness she'd always feared it was. Maybe it was the only way to be truly alive. They met at a coffee shop neither of them had been to before. Neutral territory, a place with no memories attached. Andrea arrived first, ordered black coffee she didn't really want, and sat at a corner table where she could see the door. Michael walked in 10 minutes later. He looked tired. She probably looked tired too. They were 2 tired people about to have a conversation they should have had years ago. He got tea, Earl Grey, the same thing he'd been drinking since she met him 19 years ago. Some things never changed. He sat down across from her. They looked at each other for a moment, neither knowing how to start. So, Michael said finally, we're famous. Andrea laughed, short and bitter. Infamous, maybe. I've gotten 12 calls today. Colleagues, friends, people I haven't talked to in 5 years suddenly very concerned about my well-being. Same. Plus 3 reporters asking for interviews. Are you going to do them? God, no. Are you? No. This is private, or it was supposed to be. He paused. I'm sorry about commenting with my real name. I didn't think about how easily people could connect us. You don't need to apologize. You were being honest. That's more than I've been for years. Andrea wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. Why did you comment? Michael thought about it. Because reading your post, seeing you finally be vulnerable, it made me realize I'd never been vulnerable either. We were both hiding, both pretending we were fine when we weren't. And I thought, if she can be brave enough to admit the truth, maybe I can too. We're quite a pair, Andrea said softly. 2 people who couldn't talk to each other but could talk to the entire internet. Yeah, Michael smiled sadly. We really are. They sat in silence for a moment. The coffee shop hummed around them. Other people's conversations, other people's normal days, other people who weren't sitting with their almost ex-spouse trying to figure out how to dismantle 15 years of shared life. I've been thinking about what you said this morning, Andrea began, about us not knowing what we should have done differently. I think I know now. Yeah? We should have been scared together instead of alone. Andrea looked at him directly. I was terrified of not being good enough, of failing at marriage the way I saw everyone else fail. So I worked more, hid more, pretended more. And you were terrified of something too, I think. But instead of telling each other we were scared, we just retreated into our separate corners and hoped the other person wouldn't notice. Michael's eyes were bright with emotion. I was terrified of losing you, so I tried not to need you. Thought if I didn't need you, it wouldn't hurt when you left. But by not needing you, I pushed you away anyway. Self-fulfilling prophecy. We're both idiots. Exceptionally educated idiots, Michael agreed. They both laughed, real laughter this time, and for a moment Andrea could see the man she'd married, the one who made her laugh, the one she'd loved before they both forgot how. I read all your posts again last night, Michael said. All 8 years. And Andrea, you're brilliant. Your writing, your insights, the way you see patterns and human nature. It's extraordinary. You should write a book. A book about failed marriages written by someone who failed at marriage? That's not exactly marketable. It's exactly marketable. It's honest. People don't want experts who have all the answers. They want people who've been through it and survived. You could help a lot of people. Andrea considered that. A book. She'd thought about it before, years ago, but never seriously. Books required using your real name. Books required being visible. And she'd spent so long being invisible. Maybe, she said, after the dust settles. After the divorce is final and I can think clearly again. How long do you think that'll take? The divorce? For us, 6 months probably. We don't have kids, no major assets to fight over. We're both reasonable people. Reasonable people who forgot how to love each other. Yeah. Michael traced the rim of his cup with his finger, the way he always did when he was thinking hard about something. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think we could have fixed this? If we'd tried harder, gone to therapy, actually communicated? Andrea thought about all the couples she'd represented. The ones who tried therapy and failed. The ones who communicated constantly but said nothing that mattered. The ones who did everything right and still ended up in her office signing papers. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe. But I think by the time we realized something was wrong, we were already too far gone. Or too tired. Or both. That's sad. It is. But it's also reality. Not every marriage can be saved. Sometimes people grow apart. Sometimes love isn't enough. She paused. You know what's strange? I've said that to clients 100 times. Love isn't enough. You need communication, effort, compatibility, timing, but I always thought it was enough for us. Because we loved each other, everything else would work itself out. Turns out I was wrong. We both were. They finished their drinks. The afternoon light was fading outside, gray day turning to gray evening. Andrea checked her phone. 15 more notifications. The post was still spreading. Still being shared. Still being shared. Still generating comments and articles and opinions. I should probably write a follow-up, she said. Address the response. Thank people for their support. Acknowledge the criticism. What are you going to say? I don't know yet. Maybe that being a hypocrite is just being human. That we all give better advice than we take. That expertise doesn't make you immune to failure. It just makes you more aware of it while it's happening. Michael nodded. That's good. That's honest. They stood, gathered their things, walked toward the door together. Outside, the rain had started again. Of course it had. Andrea, Michael said as they stood under the awning, I know we're getting divorced. I know this is ending. But I want you to know, I don't regret marrying you. We had good years. We had love. It didn't last, but it was real. And I'm grateful for it. Andrea felt tears threatening for the 3rd time that day. I don't regret it either. We just weren't meant to go the distance. And that's okay. It's sad, but it's okay. Yeah, Michael said. It is. They hugged. A real hug. The first physical contact they'd had in months. It felt familiar and strange and bittersweet, like saying goodbye to someone you used to know intimately and now barely recognized. When they pulled apart, Michael smiled. Good luck with the media circus. Good luck with your apartment hunting. I'll text you about logistics, division of stuff, all that fun. Sounds perfect. He walked away toward his car. Andrea watched him go. This man she'd spent 15 years with, and felt a complicated mix of sadness and relief. Grief for what they'd lost, gratitude that they'd found a way to end with kindness. She drove home. The apartment felt different now, not like a home, like a way station, a place she was passing through on her way to whatever came next. Andrea made tea, ordered Thai food because she couldn't face cooking, sat on the couch with her laptop and opened a blank document. Follow-up on being human. She started typing. 2 days ago, I published the most vulnerable post I've ever written. I admitted that my marriage is ending, that I'm a divorce lawyer who couldn't save her own relationship, that I've spent 8 years analyzing other people's failures while ignoring my own, and the response has been overwhelming. She paused. Thought about what she wanted to say. Not what sounded good, what was true. Some of you called me brave. Some called me a hypocrite. You're both right. Vulnerability takes courage, but it doesn't erase the years I spent hiding. I was a hypocrite. I gave advice I didn't follow. I saw patterns I ignored. I told people that communication was essential while my own marriage died of silence. But here's what I've learned in the past 48 hours. Being a hypocrite doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. We all give better advice than we take. We all see other people's problems more clearly than our own. We all pretend we have answers when we're just making it up as we go. My husband and I met today. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. And you know what we realized? We both spent our marriage being terrified and pretending we weren't. Terrified of failure. Terrified of vulnerability. Terrified of being seen as anything less than perfect. And that fear destroyed us more effectively than any betrayal or fight could have. Andrea stopped. Read what she'd written. It was honest. Raw. Exactly what people needed to hear. She kept writing. So here's what I want to say to everyone who's been following my blog for years, and everyone who just found it this week. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to save everyone, including yourself. You just have to be honest about your fears, your failures, your humanity. My marriage is ending. That's a failure. But writing about it, being vulnerable about it, connecting with thousands of you who shared your own stories, that's not a failure. That's the most successful thing I've done in years. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for reminding me that being seen, really seen, is terrifying and necessary and worth it. I'm still figuring out who I am after this. Who I am without the armor of expertise. Who I am without the hiding. But I'm excited to find out, and I hope you'll come with me on this journey. Andrea signed it with her real name. Andrea Hayes, J.D. No more hiding behind anonymity. No more pretending to be someone she wasn't. She published it. Within minutes, the comments started flooding in again. More support, more shared stories, more people saying thank you for being human. Andrea closed the laptop, ate her Thai food, looked out at the city lights below. Tomorrow she'd start figuring out the logistics of divorce, division of assets, new living arrangements, all the practical details of dismantling a shared life. But tonight, for the first time in years, Andrea Hayes felt something she'd almost forgotten. She felt free. 6 months later, Andrea stood in a courtroom that wasn't hers. She was on the other side for once. Not the lawyer, the client. Judge Martinez reviewed the dissolution paperwork. Everything was in order. Everything was agreed upon. Division of assets, fair and equal. No alimony, no contested items. Just two people who'd decided to go their separate ways with as much grace as they could manage. This is one of the most amicable divorce proceedings I've ever overseen, Judge Martinez said, looking between Andrea and Michael. It's rare to see mutual respect maintained through this process. We had a good teacher, Michael said, glancing at Andrea. She smiled slightly. They'd done this right. Communicated, negotiated fairly, treated each other with kindness. Everything she'd advised clients to do for 18 years, she and Michael actually did. Turned out it was easier to be mature about divorce when you weren't drowning in resentment. Very well, Judge Martinez said. I'm granting the dissolution. You're officially divorced. I wish you both the best. That was it. 15 years of marriage ended in a 7-minute hearing. Andrea signed the final papers. Michael signed. They shook hands with their respective attorneys, walked out of the courthouse into March sunshine. Portland in spring. Everything blooming. Everything starting over. That's that, Michael said. That's that, Andrea agreed. They stood on the courthouse steps, two people who used to be married and now weren't. Two people who'd failed at one thing but succeeded at ending it well. I'm moving to Seattle next month, Michael said. The firm made it official. Partner position. That's great, Michael. Congratulations. Thanks, and I heard about your book deal. That's amazing. Andrea smiled. Yeah, it is pretty amazing. The book. That had been unexpected. 3 weeks after her follow-up post went viral, a literary agent contacted her. Then another. Then 5 more. Publishers were interested. Very interested. A divorce lawyer writing honestly about her own divorce, about hypocrisy and humanity, about the gap between expertise and experience. Apparently that sold. She'd signed a deal 2 months ago. $300,000 advance. The book was due in 8 months. The Autopsy Report, Lessons from Broken Marriages, including my own. Are you going to write about me? Michael asked. I'm going to write about us, but kindly, honestly. That's all I ask. They hugged goodbye. A real hug. The hug of 2 people who'd loved each other once and didn't anymore, but still cared. Still wanted the best for each other. Still carried pieces of who they'd been together into who they'd become separately. Take care of yourself, Andrea. You too, Michael. He walked away. Andrea watched him go. No sadness this time. Just acceptance. Some chapters ended. That was okay. That was life. She drove back to her new apartment. Smaller than the old one. 10th floor instead of 19th. View of trees instead of city. Less impressive, more comfortable, more hers. Emma Rodriguez was waiting outside with coffee. Emma, who'd become a real friend over the past 6 months, who'd supported Andrea through the worst of the media attention and the best of the healing. How'd it go? Emma asked, handing her a latte. It's done. We're officially divorced. How do you feel? Andrea thought about it. Lighter. Sad, but lighter. That's healthy, Emma said. Grief and relief can coexist. They went inside. Andrea's apartment was organized chaos. Moving boxes still unpacked. Laptop open on the kitchen counter. Notes for the book scattered everywhere. This was a writer's space now, not just a lawyer's. You're still coming to the thing tonight, right? Emma asked. The thing. Right. Andrea had almost forgotten. Tonight was the first meeting of the support group she'd started. Divorced Lawyers Anonymous, they jokingly called it. A group for legal professionals going through their own divorces, trying to maintain their careers while their personal lives imploded. 7 people had signed up. All lawyers, all recently divorced or divorcing, all dealing with the specific hell of representing divorce while experiencing it. Yeah, I'll be there, Andrea said. I'm actually looking forward to it. That's because you're secretly a therapist who went to law school by mistake. Maybe. Andrea smiled. Or maybe I just finally figured out that helping people means being honest about your own mess, not pretending you have all the answers. Emma left an hour later. Andrea made tea. Sat at her laptop. Opened the manuscript she'd been working on. Chapter 7. The Expert Illusion. She'd written 60,000 words in 3 months. The book was pouring out of her. All the observations from 8 years of blogging, but deeper now. More personal. More raw. Because she wasn't writing from a place of analysis anymore. She was writing from a place of experience. The blog had changed too. She still posted twice a week, but now she signed her real name. Andrea Hayes, J.D. Divorce lawyer. Divorced woman. Human being figuring it out as she went. Her follower count had exploded. 1.2 million now. Turns out people liked authenticity more than expertise. Her phone buzzed. Text from Jessica Parker, the client who'd reminded Andrea of herself 6 months ago. Finalized my divorce today. Wanted to thank you again for everything. You made an impossible thing bearable. And your honesty about your own divorce gave me permission to admit mine wasn't a failure, just an ending. Thank you. Andrea smiled, texted back. Congratulations, not on the divorce but on getting through it. You're going to be okay. She meant it. Jessica would be okay. They'd all be okay. Divorce wasn't death. It was just change. Painful, necessary change. At 6 o'clock, Andrea changed into comfortable clothes, grabbed her bag, and drove to the community center where the support group met. 7 people showed up. 3 women, 4 men, all lawyers, all exhausted, all relieved to be in a room where they didn't have to pretend. "Hi," Andrea said. "I'm Andrea Hayes. I'm a divorce lawyer. I'm divorced, and I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm committed to figuring it out honestly. Welcome." They went around the circle. Names, stories, pain shared in a safe space. No judgment, no expertise, just humans being human together. By 8 o'clock, when the meeting ended, Andrea felt that familiar sense of purpose she used to feel winning cases. But this was better. This wasn't about winning. This was about connecting. She drove home, made dinner, worked on the book until midnight. The words came easily now. She was writing about Case 348, her own case, the marriage that taught her more than any she'd represented. At 12:30, she posted a new blog entry. 6 months ago, I published a post that changed my life. I admitted my marriage was ending. I revealed my identity. I chose vulnerability over hiding. And today, my divorce was finalized. I'm not going to lie and say it doesn't hurt. It does. Grief is real, even when divorce is right. But I'm also okay. Better than okay. I'm free. Free from pretending. Free from hiding. Free from the exhausting work of maintaining an image that wasn't real. Someone asked me last week if I regretted writing that first honest post, if I wished I'd kept hiding, and I said no, because that post led to this, to a book deal, to new friendships, to a support group helping other lawyers through divorce, to a version of myself I actually like. Vulnerability is terrifying, but it's also liberating, and I'm grateful I finally learned that. To everyone going through endings right now, whether marriages or jobs or friendships or versions of yourself that no longer fit, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to grieve, but it's also okay to be excited about what comes next. Both can be true. Thank you for being on this journey with me. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for reminding me every day that being human, with all its mess and failure and beauty, is enough. Andrea signed it, published it, closed her laptop. She walked to the window, looked out at Portland at night, trees silhouetted against city lights, sky full of stars you could almost see through the light pollution. Somewhere out there, Michael was packing for Seattle, starting his new chapter, and Andrea was here, starting hers. Different paths. That was okay. That was good even. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, hiding behind anonymity, drowning in a loveless marriage, pretending to have answers she didn't have. That woman felt like a stranger now. This woman, the one standing at the window in sweatpants with tea cooling on the counter and a half-written book calling her name, this woman was real, flawed, honest, figuring it out. And for the first time in years, Andrea Hayes was happy. Not the kind of happiness that comes from success or achievement or external validation. The kind that comes from alignment. From being on the outside who you are on the inside. From letting yourself be seen, completely and honestly, and discovering that being seen doesn't destroy you. It saves you. You know, I've spent the last hour with Andrea. Watched her marriage end. Watched her choose vulnerability over safety. Watched her discover that expertise doesn't protect you from being human, and being human is actually the point. And I want to ask you 3 questions. Not to answer out loud, just to sit with. First, what are you hiding right now because you're afraid of being seen as imperfect? What expertise or image are you maintaining that's exhausting you? Second, if someone you trusted said, your vulnerability would help more people than your expertise, would you believe them? Would you have the courage to be honest? Third, when was the last time you admitted you didn't have the answers? That you were figuring it out as you went? That you were scared and doing it anyway? Think about those. Really think about them. Because Andrea's story isn't just about divorce. It's about the masks we all wear, the versions of ourselves we perform, the gap between who we pretend to be and who we actually are. And maybe, just maybe, closing that gap is where real life begins. If this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something true, leave a comment. Share your own story of choosing vulnerability. Or just say you were here, because this channel, Bittersweet Whispers, is building something special. A community of people who believe that honest stories matter, that being human with all its mess is worth celebrating. If you want more stories like this, stories that make you feel deeply and think honestly, subscribe. Not because I'm asking for a favor, but because you're choosing to say yes to depth, yes to truth, yes to stories that stay with you. And share this, not for the algorithm, but because you know someone who needs to hear that it's okay to not have all the answers. Someone who's hiding behind expertise or perfection or fear. Someone who needs permission to be human. Next week, we have another story about a woman named Claire who spent 20 years as a high school guidance counselor, giving students advice about following their dreams while her own dreams died in a drawer. And what happened when one student asked her the question she'd been avoiding her whole life? When are you going to take your own advice? Until then, remember Andrea's lesson. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the only way to be truly alive. Your mess matters. Your truth matters. You matter. Even without the expertise. Even without having it all figured out. Especially then. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing that stories like this are worth your time. Until next time. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you're just as lost as everyone else, but at least you're lost together.